Have you ever watched a street magician perform a shell game? A T puts a P under one of three shells. He shuffles them around faster than your eyes can follow. You think you know exactly where the P is. You bet your money on the middle shell. But when he lifts it up, the shell is empty. The P was never there. It was in his palm the whole time. Right now, the Federal Reserve is playing the largest shell game in human history. And the P they are hiding is inflation. They are shuffling the shells of interest rates, balance sheets, and bank reserves. They are distracting you with headlines about a soft landing. They are telling you that the economy is strong and that price stability is returning. But when you go to the grocery store, you know the truth. When you pay your insurance premium, you know the truth. When you try to buy a house, you know the truth. The money in your pocket is dying, and it is not an accident. It is a deliberate policy choice to save the system from collapsing. Most people are asking why the U.S. bond market hasn't crashed yet. If Japan is selling hundreds of billions of dollars in treasuries, yields should be skyrocketing. Mortgage rates should be at 10%. The stock market should be down 30%, but it isn't. Why? Because the Federal Reserve has engaged in a secret operation to print money without calling it money printing. They have activated a series of backdoors and trapdoors in the financial plumbing. They are absorbing the debt that Japan is dumping. They are monetizing the deficit through stealth liquidity, and the cost of this operation is the value of your dollar. They are sacrificing the currency to save the bond market. This is what I call the currency trap, and you are currently standing right in the middle of it. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to expose the mechanics of this fraud. I am going to show you the specific accounts where they are hiding the new money. I am going to explain why the inflation you are feeling today is just the warm-up act for what is coming in 2026. And I am going to show you the only way to opt out of their system before they devalue your life savings to zero. The shell game is ending, and it is time to see what is really in their hand. The stealth printing press. To understand how they are tricking you, we have to look at the mechanics of the Federal Reserve. Officially, the Fed is doing something called quantitative tightening. They claim they are shrinking their balance sheet. They claim they are pulling money out of the economy to fight inflation. That is what Jerome Powell says at every press conference. But if you look at the footnotes of the H4.1 release, which is the Fed's weekly balance sheet report, you see a different story. You see a massive injection of liquidity coming from the back door. Let's talk about the reverse repo facility. Think of the reverse repo facility as the Fed's overflow tank. For years, there was too much cash in the system, so money market funds parked trillions of dollars at the Fed overnight. It sat there, doing nothing. But when the government needed to borrow trillions of dollars to fund its deficit, and when Japan started selling bonds, that money had to come from somewhere. So the Fed opened the valve. They allowed that money to drain out of the reverse repo facility and flow into the Treasury market. In the last 12 months alone, over $1 trillion has drained from this facility. That is $1 trillion of liquidity injected into the veins of the market. It offset the selling from Japan. It offset the selling from China. It kept interest rates artificially low. It was quantitative easing in everything but name. They used your own money market funds to bail out the government. But that is not the only trick. Remember the Bank Term Funding Program? The BTFP. They launched it during the Silicon Valley bank crisis to save the banks. They told us it was a temporary emergency measure. They told us it would end in 1 year. But the liquidity from that program is still sloshing around the system. And now they are quietly allowing banks to borrow from the discount window without the stigma that used to come with it. They are accepting damaged collateral at par value. Think about how insane that is. If you have a car that you crashed and it is worth $5,000, the bank will lend you $20,000 against it as if it were brand new. That is what the Fed is doing for the banks. They are taking bonds that have lost value because of high rates, and they are lending fresh cash against them at full face value. Where does that fresh cash come from? It is printed out of thin air. Every time they do this, they dilute the pool of existing dollars. Every time they inject liquidity to stop a market crash, they steal a fraction of your purchasing power. This is why the stock market is at all-time highs, while the real economy is crumbling. The stock market is not measuring economic health. It is measuring monetary debasement. It is going up because the dollar is going down. It is the Weimar Republic effect. In Germany in 1923, the stock market went up millions of %. But nobody was getting rich. They were starving because the currency was becoming toilet paper. We are not at hyperinflation yet, but the mechanism is exactly the same. The Fed creates money to buy the debt that nobody else wants. Japan sells. The Fed's stealth facilities buy, and you pay for it at the gas pump. The stagflation nightmare. The result of this stealth printing is not a booming economy. It is stagflation. Stagflation is the worst of all worlds. It is a stagnant economy combined with high inflation. It is 1970s-style misery, but with 2020s level debt. Look around you. We are seeing layoffs in major industries. Tech companies are shedding workers. Logistics companies are cutting shifts. Cardboard box sales, which are a leading indicator of recession, are crashing. Full-time jobs are disappearing, replaced by part-time gig work. That is the stagnation part. The economy is grinding to a halt because interest rates are technically high for the private sector. Small businesses cannot afford to borrow at 10%, so they shrink. They stop hiring, they stop expanding. But then look at prices. Insurance costs are up 20%. Property taxes are up. Utilities are up. Services are up. That is the inflation part. Why are prices rising if demand is falling? Because the currency is broken. The Fed is keeping the government flush with cash while starving the private sector. The government is spending $6 trillion a year. They are hiring bureaucrats. They are funding wars. They are subsidizing inefficiencies. That spending is inflationary. It competes for resources. It drives up the cost of raw materials and labor. So you have a private sector recession masked by a government spending boom. This is why the GDP numbers look positive while you feel poor. The GDP is measuring government waste, not productive growth. And here is the trap. The Fed cannot stop. If they stop the stealth liquidity, interest rates will explode to their true market level. The true market rate for U.S. debt with this level of deficit and inflation should be 7 or 8%. If rates go to 8%, the U.S. government becomes insolvent. The interest expense on the national debt would exceed all tax revenue. The entire federal budget would just be interest payments. No military, no Social Security, no Medicare, just interest. The system would collapse instantly, so they cannot allow rates to rise. They must keep printing. They must keep shuffling the shells. They must keep suppressing yields with phantom liquidity. But by doing so, they guarantee that inflation will never go back to 2%. 3% is the new floor. Then 4%. Then 5%. It creates a compounding loss of wealth for anyone holding cash or bonds. You are like a frog in a pot of water. They are turning up the heat slowly so you don't jump out. They want you to accept 5% inflation as normal. They want you to accept that a starter home costs $500,000. They want you to accept that a pound of ground beef costs $10. They are normalizing your poverty. The invisible tax. This brings us to the most important concept you need to understand. Inflation is a tax. It is a tax that is never voted on by Congress. It is a tax that you do not see on your pay stub. But it is the most vicious tax of all because it hits the poorest and the oldest the hardest. When the government spends money it doesn't have, and the Fed prints the difference, they are transferring value from you to them. They get the new money first. They get to spend it at current prices. By the time that money trickles down to you in the form of wages, prices have already risen. You get the devalued leftovers. Think about your retirement savings. If you worked for 40 years and saved $1 million, you thought you were set. But if inflation runs at 5% for 10 years, the purchasing power of that $1 million is cut in half. $500,000 of your labor was just stolen, vaporized, transferred to the state to pay for their debts. This is what Japan is forcing the U.S. to do. By selling treasuries, Japan is saying, we don't want to pay this tax anymore. They are exiting the system. China is exiting the system. The BRICS nations are exiting the system. They all see the scam. They know that the US dollar is being debased to fund the American empire, and they are refusing to hold the bag. So who is left holding the bag? You are, the American pension funds. The American insurance companies, the American middle class. They are trapping you inside a burning building and locking the doors. They have capital controls in place, not explicitly, but implicitly. Try moving a large amount of cash out of the banking system. See how many forms you have to fill out. See how many questions they ask. They are building a digital fence around your wealth. And with the introduction of CBDC's central bank digital currencies, that fence will become a prison wall. A CBDC is the ultimate tool for negative interest rates. If they want to stimulate the economy, they can just program your money to expire if you don't spend it. They can automatically deduct the inflation tax from your digital wallet. It is total control. And the currency trap we are in right now is the excuse they will use to implement it. They will say the current system is unstable. They will say we need a modern solution. And they will offer you the digital collar as if it were a necklace. Escaping the trap. So how do you escape? How do you opt out of a system that is rigged against you? The answer is simple, but it requires courage. You have to stop saving in their currency. You have to stop measuring your wealth in dollars, because the dollar is a melting ice cube. You need to measure your wealth in ounces, in acres, in barrels. Hard assets are the kryptonite to the Fed's money printing. They cannot print gold. They cannot print silver. They cannot print oil. They cannot print fertile farmland. When the currency collapses, these assets reprice higher. They preserve your purchasing power. Look at gold right now. It is hitting all-time highs in every currency on Earth. In yen, in euros, in yuan, in dollars. Gold is sniffing out the stealth key. Gold knows the Fed is lying. Central banks around the world are buying gold at a record pace. Why? Because they know the math doesn't work. They know the U.S. debt spiral is terminal. They are hedging their bets. You need to do the same. You need to become your own central bank. You need to have a portion of your wealth outside of the financial system. Physical gold and silver in your own possession. Not a paper ETF, not a contract. The metal itself, because in a crisis, paper promises burn. Physical reality endures. You also need to look at fixed-rate debt as an asset. If you have a 30-year mortgage at 3%, do not pay it off. That is an asset. The inflation is paying off your debt for you. You are paying back the bank with devalued dollars. You are on the right side of the trade, but do not take on adjustable rate debt. Credit cards, HELOCs. Those will destroy you as rates stay higher for longer. Pay those off immediately. Get lean, get hard, get real. We are entering the end game of the fiat currency experiment. It usually lasts about 50 years. We went off the gold standard in 1971. Do the math. We are on borrowed time. The Japan exit is just the catalyst. It is the first domino. But the real story is the reaction of the Federal Reserve. Their refusal to face reality. Their addiction to the printing press. And their willingness to sacrifice the American middle class to save the banking cartel. Don't let them take you down with the ship. You have the information now, can see the shell game for what it is. The P is not under the shell. The value is not in the dollar. The value is in what the dollar can buy right now before they print more of it. Turn your paper into things. Turn your digits into reality. K, I'm tracking the real inflation rate based on a basket of essential goods, not the fake CPI basket the government uses. I am tracking the price of beef, eggs, gasoline, lumber, and copper. The real inflation rate is closer to 12%. I will be releasing a full report on the true cost of living next week, exposing the gap between their data and your reality. You need to see this data to plan your budget for 2026. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you get that report. Do not let them gaslight you. Trust your eyes. Trust your wallet. And prepare for the impact. I will see you on the next one.